Did you know that one of the 20th century's greatest iconic performers, Elvis Presley, would have been 90 today? That I find absolutely mind blowing to think that Elvis would have been 90, that he could have been shuffling around right now as an old man. Born on the 8th of January 1935 in Tupelo, Mississippi, the only surviving one of twins. He died on the 16th of August 1977 under circumstances which are still somewhat debated, and he is undoubtedly one of the 20th century's great iconic characters. And I think that the anniversary itself is largely passing by without mention. I think as a cultural icon, he's sort of starting to be forgotten a little bit. But the influence is undoubted on lots and lots of things. Across music, even today, we're still seeing performers who, whether they realise it or not, are drawing on the legacy and the path that he trod for them. I'm going to be honest with you, I have been an Elvis fan my entire life, and it is something that I find very, very hard to shake. As a kid, growing up in Northern Ireland in the 80s and 90s, I was mocked quite a bit for my love of Elvis because I was very, very open about it. He wasn't deemed to be cool. This was a guy from generations before, but I'm still a big fan. I love his music. I love his style. I love the persona, and I love the image and everything else about it and what was involved with that. I started listening to Elvis thanks to records that my mum had at home. There were two, one of which was this one, a reissue of Elvis Presley's first album, Rock and Roll. And I played this endlessly. This was full of sort of rock and roll classics. Lottie Miss Claudie, Blue Suede Shoes, Money Honey. I love this album. Shake, Rattle and Roll's on here as well. And this got played very, very loudly, very, very often. I'm surprised my copy hasn't worn out, to be honest. Although I have subsequently turned to CD and streaming for just to save the collection a little bit. But I love that album. It was very, very raw. It was very early. His voice is so youthful and strong and powerful and exciting. And listening to stuff, especially his 50s music, I feel that an awful lot. At one point in the early 90s, we acquired this album, Essential Elvis Volume 3, part of a series, but this is essentially outtakes from the stuff that he was doing for RCA just before he went off to serve in the army in Germany. And this includes a lot of the songs from King Creole, which is a film which I also adore and would highly recommend you check out. I did a podcast on it a couple of years ago with Cinepunked. It's an exciting, young, kind of rebellious Elvis, plus a score that's heavily influenced by New Orleans bands. It's brilliant. His stuff in the 1960s, I understand, is a little bit more wishy-washy. He gets caught in this kind of trap of a lot of movies that are not very good, with scores that are rather insipid. There are odd moments in them and a couple of gems. Again, one of my favourites, Blue Hawaii, a film which also features the gorgeous Angela Lansbury, and anything with Angela I think is pretty darn good. Although weirdly she plays his mother even though she's only a few years older than him. This album is a stunning soundtrack. I still play it regularly and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, another favourite album from my collection, although very worn. I think for me though, my inroad was this wonderful compilation. One of the first ones I got was a Christmas present, Presley The All-Time Greatest Hits. This was originally released in 1987. It's a double album, and this covered everything he did in RCA from 1956 through from Heartbreak Hotel through to those last records in 1977. And I think, look, that image on the front is a very, very bold, striking, gorgeous image of a very young Elvis, iconic. But what I also loved was on the inside, there's this wonderful gatefold sleeve packed full of Elvis memorabilia, lots of little pictures from throughout his life. And I don't know, something about this got me excited. Maybe it's the nerdy collector in me, but something about that had me roped in, and I started watching a lot more films, documentaries. I read books about him, and I got very, very obsessed for a while. I think part of the reason that maybe Elvis has lost some of his impact is because a lot of folk now will think about him in terms of the 1970s during the Las Vegas period, where he is doing these shows endlessly. It's a lot of the same kind of music for several years. He's also, when he's recording, he's tending to kind of move in a more country direction, which isn't quite for everyone. I appreciate that, and it's very country. It's not the kind of rockabilly that he was doing in the 50s. This is more kind of pure country. But there are, again, moments of brilliance within that. And, you know, he's wearing these wonderful rhinestone-clad flared suits, which are gorgeous, which are iconic, but that I think that has kind of left him somewhat more open to parody. Especially if you're kind of familiar with his last few performances, where he is very overweight and not at all well. And I say that as a man who's just slightly older than Elvis was, and who is himself now in a situation where I'm very overweight. But Elvis's sort of image, because he sort of, for a lot of people, he is about youth and rebellion and challenging the status quo. You know, he's playing black music at a time where America is full of segregation. He is projecting an image of raw sexuality at a time where sexuality is coming into its own, and the older generation is slightly wary of it. And they're scared for what it's going to do for the youth, and it's the pill is not that far away. This is a period of increasing liberation post-war. He is undoubtedly an iconic performer, a huge influence in terms of how music was managed and portrayed, and the importance of his persona in terms of how music is successful. And I think he's a cultural icon that's worth exploring and appreciating. I also just happen to think that his music is really good, and that some of it is very, very exciting and fun. And it would be remiss of me not to talk about what is for me one of my icons, one of my cultural signposts, on the occasion of the 90th anniversary of his birth. And whilst I can't quite see Elvis shuffling around Graceland in his 90s and his slippers, I do think that, it's a shame that we didn't get to see a bit more of this, that we didn't get to see the King kind of explore new music in the 80s, to see how he would have embraced his older age. Would he have gone the same way as some of his peers like Jerry Lee Lewis and Carl Perkins and Little Richard, and kind of, stay in that? Or would he have done something new and exciting? Would he have been like a David Bowie, who also shares a birthday today, incidentally? Would have been something like that, and kind of gone through a changeling process and done something else, and been a little bit more ahead of the game. But yeah, Elvis at 90. I don't know if you're a fan at all. If you are, I'm assuming you may have actually watched this video in its entirety. If you're not, you probably switched off after the first couple of seconds. But what do you think? Is he someone that we've kind of overlooked? And yes, I know there are elements within the Elvis story which are today somewhat suspect. They aren't as comfortable as they would have been 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I accept that. I'm not condoning everything the man ever did. But I think one can still sit back and look and listen and enjoy. And that's what I plan on doing with some of the rest of my evening. So how are you going to mark the occasion? Or have you never listened to an Elvis record, and is now the time that you're going to start?